Okay. So we're going to move pretty fast through this. There's a lot of stuff I want to cover, and I want to make sure we don't miss anything. What I'd like you guys to do, if you have a question, there's a little thing on Zoom. Let me see, where is it? All right, somewhere on here, there's a little thing to raise your hand. Maybe somebody knows where the hell it is. There we go. I'm missing where the button is. So whoever found it, could you share that? Tell everyone else how to find it.
It's right in the middle of the bottom of my screen.
Okay. I probably don't have it because I'm the presenter then. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you guys in a second here. But what we're going to be talking about is a lot of things that we could be doing. Like, there's a lot of different components of marketing, and there's a lot of ways we can get more out of those. So we're going to cover some topics, some tactics that we can use to get more out of the marketing that we're already doing. Doesn't mean it's going to take a lot of work. Doesn't mean you're going to have to put in extra hours. It just means putting some things in place to get a little bit more out of what you're already doing. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with you guys here. And let's see, there we go. So we'll share this one. Is everyone able to see this screen okay?
I can see it.
Okay,
yes.
Cool. Let's see if I can just kind of drag that a little bit out of the way here. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is remarketing. So we all put a lot of effort into getting people to our website, right? Whether it's we're using print ads, we're using social media, we're telling people about it when we meet them somewhere, you know, whatever tactic, whatever channel we're using to get people there. For most people, the problem is that once somebody gets to our website, that's the end of it. They come and they bounce back, they go somewhere else after that, and then we never hear from them again. Or maybe they, you know, submit a contact form and then kind of leave from there, whatever the case may be. But there's a really powerful tool we can use so that once somebody arrives on our website, we can continue marketing to them for a certain period of time. And that's called remarketing. Now, both Facebook and Google has this. We're going to just talk about Facebook real quick here. We're not going to cover Google. The concept is the same. The methodology for putting it in place is a little bit different. But why this is important is, let's say somebody comes to your website and, like all of us, they're busy. So they don't get a chance to dig in, or they don't contact you, or they don't call you, or they don't take whatever the next step is. If they leave, there's a very good chance that you may never see them again. However, if you can stay in front of them for the next several days or several weeks, or, you know, even longer, you can do it, you know, up to several months really. If you can stay in front of them that way, you're going to have a lot better chance of converting them, right? We've all seen these ads on Facebook and on various websites where we go and we look at something, and then for whatever reason we don't follow through on it, and then we see the ads popping up. And a lot of times, if we're serious about whatever it is that they offer, that drives us to take action. So what we're going to talk about in this section here is doing this with Facebook. So if we're doing Facebook ads, we want to do this in Business Manager, and you'll go up here to ads. We're going to go to, we're looking for audiences. Now, in order to do this, you have to have a pixel set on your website. So Facebook has a specific pixel that you need. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to go and create an audience, and that's going to be a custom audience. Your source is going to be your website. So this is already set up. So let's call this, let's say we want to say anybody in the past 3 days. So we can call this 3 days. Create the audience. So now it's going to do, all right, so it may not be there yet. We're going to go ahead and click add and see if it's there. Sometimes it takes, you know, a few minutes. Sometimes it's almost instant. So from this point, we then go and create an ad. And of course, Chrome is blocking it. There we go. And what this is going to do is it's going to give you the option to set an ad. There we go. So now, and of course, you're going to have to name this because it's just got placeholders in here. But now we've got this ad created where once somebody comes to your website, you now have the ability to market to them for a period of days. In this case, we set it for 3 days. You can set up different types of timeframes depending on what the circumstances are. You can also set different timeframes depending on, the pages that they went to. There's a lot of different variables you can put in place. Basically, the core of what we're talking about here in this case is when somebody comes to the website, this gives us the ability to continue to market to them for, from now up until a period into the future. I think if I remember correctly, it goes up to a year. Now, all of the variables that go into this, that's going to depend on, the type of customer you're talking about. It's going to depend on what you're offering. Maybe one product is something that might have a very long buying cycle, so you might want to have a longer window for that. Whereas something that's an inexpensive product or service with a short buying cycle, maybe you just run that for a few days. But this is something that's going to help maximize all of the web traffic that you get, help convert that a little bit better, because you're going to stay in front of them once they've come to your website. And that's when they've already got that emotion is high, because they're thinking about whatever problem that thing is going to solve for them. So that's that in a nutshell. That's pretty straightforward. Does anybody have any questions on that so far? All right, I'll take that as a no. All right. So another thing I want to talk about is, oops, I see we got something up here. Okay. Lisa's coming in with a question. If you want to just ask it out loud, that's probably the easiest way, Lisa. You just have to take yourself off mute.
No, I didn't have a question. Sorry, I was just saying, no, I'm all good.
Oh, I see a Q&A in here for some reason.
Oh, that was from earlier when you were asking where to submit the questions.
Gotcha.
Showing you where
Okay.
it is. Yeah.
Looks like I've got, all right, good. All right. So another thing I want to touch on is, we all know that we need great content to get people to our site. And that's from an organic search perspective, but it's also something that gives you content you can share on social media. Problem is, a lot of us don't have a lot of time to write this content. So a great tactic we can use here is creating a Write For Us page. Now, what that's going to do is that's going to draw in the people who have an expertise on a particular topic and they want to reach your audience. They find these pages. So if you have a page, basically it's titled, Write For Us, and you put some information in about whatever topics you're covering. We'll talk a little bit about the structure of this page in a second. But basically what this does then is it gets you in front of the other marketers in your industry, and then they want to come right on your website, which is fine. Like, there's no problem with having maybe competitors even, but certainly other people who are in tangential industries that are complementary to yours. All right. They're doing this because they want to get in front of your audience, and they also want to get that link back to their site. So what these marketers will do is they'll go out and they'll put in an industry. So, maybe they're looking for, natural health. So they might put into Google, Write For Us plus natural health, or guest post plus natural health, things like this. So they're actively looking for opportunities to write. So if you put up a page that outlines that you give people the ability to do this, it's going to draw those people to you because they're going to find you in search. Now, it's really important, if you do this, to lay out very specific guidelines as to what type of content you're looking for, what type of editorial guidelines you have, right? So you might say that you want content that's at a minimum of 1,000 words. And you may have some editorial guidelines where you tell them, make sure that you break up the content into easily digestible chunks. We can only link out to authoritative, trustworthy sources, not some random place, right? Obviously, they're going to want to link to their own site, and that's fine, but you don't want to link to every random thing on the internet. So what we want to do within this is we want to give them very specific guidelines as to what type of content you're looking for, and that's going to prevent them from wasting a bunch of your time, and it's going to help draw in the right people. So when we're doing this, what we want to focus on is really good content. So the longer, the better. There was several studies done over the last probably 5 years or so that show a strong correlation between the length of content versus compared to how well it ranks in the search engines. So my rule of thumb is a minimum of 1,000 words. We want to make sure to break that content up. So now we're delving into the editorial guidelines. We want to tell them to break the content up. So use unordered lists or ordered lists where possible. Use images. Use your heading tags appropriately. All right, you've got H1 all the way down to H6. This is in the HTML side of things. You break things up this way, and it makes the content more readable, more digestible for your readers. So if you're laying all of this out, they're not going to generally submit something that's garbage because they know that this is what you're going to require in order to accept that guest post. And then we want to make sure to link to that page from various pages within our website so that it gets found by Google and that it starts to rank, so that when somebody comes out here and searches for, guest posts in whatever industry, then they're going to find that. While we're doing this, something I want to touch on is people tend to rank these based on the organic traffic that a website's getting. So if your website's not getting any traffic, you're probably not going to get a lot of people wanting to submit content there anyway. So what we want to do is, focus on getting some links to the site so that people will want to submit content there. If you've got other things about your business that make your website more important, for example, let's say you've got a very active and very engaged email list. That's something you'll want to mention on this Write For Us page, because it's going to give them an incentive, right? If they know that you send out an email every week and you get 30, 40% open rate, whatever your number is, and they have the opportunity to get in front of those people as well, even if your website doesn't get the kind of traffic that they would normally want to guest post on in terms of volume, if you've got other incentives, maybe you've got a great social media following or that email list that we talked about, these things could all be great incentives for them to write for you, even if you don't have that organic traffic. So these are some things to think about on that. Any questions so far? All right. The next thing I want to touch on is the contact form. So contact form is something that most people are not doing a good job with. For most of us, our contact form it's very basic. Somebody comes to the website, they fill out the form, it takes them to another page that says, thanks, we've received your message, something to that effect. And that's basically the gist of it. And if that's all that yours does, you're leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. So I'm going to give you guys an example of how I've got mine set up. And there's actually some things we are in the process of modifying that that I'm going to cover here today. We're actually in the process of doing a complete website redesign. But let's go ahead and go here. We'll put this in website. We'll just say NA. The voices in my head told me to. All right. This is another thing I want to touch on. David can certainly relate to this. Your contact form should definitely have some kind of thing to prevent some of the bots. David's actually been getting hammered by bots lately. As your website does get more authoritative and you start to get more traffic, you're definitely going to become a target. So make sure there's some kind of thing in place on your contact form. But we don't need to go too deep into that. So here's the cool part about this. Once you click send, so I talked about how most people, when they submit the form, it just goes to a page saying, we got your message and we'll be in touch shortly. Something along those lines. Here's what mine does. So it takes them to a thank you page, but it's got their name in it. I'm setting expectations right out of the gate. So we tell them their next step is to schedule a consultation. Tell them how long that consultation is going to be and what we're going to discuss during that consultation. They've got a link right here. Is anybody familiar with Calendly? No. Okay. So basically, this is a tool that allows you to, oh, we've got a comment here. Let me pull this up. Okay, that was Michelle. All right. So basically, Calendly is a tool that allows you to skip all this back and forth nonsense that we all see when we're trying to nail down a time to get together with somebody. So if somebody clicks on a Calendly link, it's connected to my calendar. So they can immediately schedule something, so they can find a spot on there that works for them. And then from right there, they can click that button and it's going to automatically take them, secure a spot on my calendar. It's going to send them an email, give them all the information. And then it's got this little link in there where they can click on that and it will add it to their calendar as well. It's a huge time saver and it strikes while the iron's hot, right? They're already here. They're on the thank you page. The conversion difference here was somewhere in the like 70% range from people before this was in place to now having all of this stuff in place. 9 times out of 10, well, if I said 70, it would be 7 times out of 10, I suppose. But when somebody gets to this point, they're more likely to schedule that consultation right off the bat. So it's already set there. While I'm here, and there's actually something I'm going to add to this that's not here right now, but this is something called social proof. This is something most of you guys have probably heard about. Basically, social proof is just basically proof that you are qualified, you're an expert, and you know what you're talking about. So some things could be, maybe you've been featured in the media. So you could put a video of like a television interview here, or a link to an article in Entrepreneur where you're being interviewed, things like that. Maybe you have a column at an authoritative publication. There's a lot of things you can do here that can show that you know what you're talking about and that you're qualified to solve their problem. I want to touch on something important here, and that is not to go overboard. It's really easy to ramble on about ourselves, and I think if given the opportunity, most of us would do that for a very long amount of time. Generally, if you go with like 3 things, or if you're just going to do some places you've been featured in, if you've been featured in a bunch of different publications, you could just stick a bunch of those logos on there and that's good. Or you could even link them to a media page where you have all of them listed. But what we're doing here is trying to show the potential client that you are the person who's qualified to solve their problem. From there, and something I want to touch on here about Calendly, and this is going to be true with any of these. There's a whole bunch of these different tools. Calendly is the one I use, but there's other ones for scheduling. And with most of these tools, you're able to modify, for example, you can tie this in with your email. So right now we're using Aweber. We're getting ready to move to ActiveCampaign. But let's say somebody clicks on a Calendly link here that I've got set up. This has the ability that if they click on something, then we can use automation tools like Zapier to then modify their tags in Aweber or whatever email system you're using. Maybe you're using Infusionsoft, ActiveCampaign, ClickFunnels, any of these kind of things for that type of stuff. This gives you the ability to really build a strong segmented list. So if somebody has clicked on a Calendly link or whatever you're using for scheduling, then they tend to be more serious about taking action than somebody who just gets here and doesn't do anything. So you want to notate that in your system if possible. And for most of these systems, this can be done. I mean, you've got automation tools like Zapier. If This Then That is another great one. And these tie into most of the major software platforms you're going to be using for any of this kind of stuff. Something else that we want to touch on here is bringing people over to social media. So here I'm encouraging them to connect with me on LinkedIn. And what this does is, at this point, we've now accomplished several things. So they've come to the website. So now we've basically fired that Facebook pixel so we can continue marketing to them indefinitely. Or we could even modify it a little bit. So they come to the website, maybe they get one set of ads, or they come over here. Once they hit the thank you page, they get a different set of ads. And that's all automated. You don't have to do anything with it. There's no manual work on your part. But we've got that in place. Now they've done this. On the back end, your contact form can be tied to your email system so that once they fill out this form, they're now included on your mailing list. So now we've got 2 points of contact. Now we can continue marketing to them through Facebook, and we can also continue marketing to them through email. But then down here, I'm encouraging them to connect on LinkedIn. So now if they go over there, connect with me over there, now I have a third point of contact that as I'm posting content on social media, they now see it there. So once they've reached this point, if they've taken these steps, now they see my ads on Facebook and potentially Google. They're also on the email list, so now they see the emails. And then they see my content on social media. So now we've got all these points of contact, and it's not requiring any more effort once it's already set up and in place. Something I want to encourage you guys to do is put some personality into this message, right? We talk about the stuff that we're, up here, we're talking about setting expectations, all of that. But down here, I definitely explain this in the same kind of terminology that you'd hear if you sat down and talked to me in person. Anyone who follows me on social media, you guys know that I don't really filter it too much. I say what the hell I think, and that's going to turn some people off, and that's fine. It's going to draw the right people in and push the wrong people away. So don't be afraid to have a little bit of personality there. Throw something funny in there. If you can make somebody laugh, you're going to engage with them emotionally, and it really goes a long way in getting them to engage more regularly. Okay. Any questions on this so far? Nothing. All right. All right, so let's get rid of this one. All right, let me get a show of hands. Who here has been featured in the media? Or feel free to just chime in and say something. All right. Bear with me, I just gotta load this back up. Where is that? All right, so I see some hands up and I'm not sure where the hell that screen went. But okay, so we've all been featured in the media. Who wants to get featured in the media more? If you guys want to, feel free to go ahead and unmute yourselves and just chime in rather than using the stuff.
Only if it's not an arrest.
I make no promises, David. All right, so I'm going to give you guys a great way to both stay on top of your brand in terms of what's being found on the internet, but also on top of that, stay on the radar of various media people so that you can pitch them and get your stories in the media. Is anyone here familiar with Google News Alerts? All right. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, basically this is a tool that you can set up. It's totally free. And you put in specific search terms into this tool, and Google, as they crawl the web, whenever they find something mentioning that particular key phrase, they're going to go ahead and send you an alert. Now you can set that up to where they will send it out to you instantly or compile them and send them all to you at the end of the day. So Michelle, I know you've got a background in search here. You've probably used them to monitor clients or your own name or things like that. And that's something I would encourage everybody to do. Definitely set up Google News Alerts for your own name, for your company name. If you've got specific product names that aren't generic, right? Like there's a brand name for your product, set them up for that. That's a great way to see if, maybe somebody mentioned you somewhere in an article but didn't link to you. That's a great way to go back and reach out to them and, hey, thanks for mentioning me. If you don't mind, would you throw a quick link in there just so that people can find what you're talking about more easily? Something like that. But a really cool way that you can use this, in addition to that, is to find the reporters, the journalists, the writers, the people who are covering the topics that matter in your industry. Now, it's everybody from major media publications like Entrepreneur and Forbes, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, any of the major news publications or media publications, all the way down to trade pubs and even small blogs. Find these publications and you can put in a person's name. So let's say, Tom Smith is a writer at Entrepreneur, and he writes on topics that are generally covering the type of things that you do. You could put in, let me just pull up a thing here. So you could put in, so let's say Tom Smith. Let's see, who do we want to use? Hey, Lisa, go ahead and unmute yourself for a second. Let's use you as an example, if you don't mind.
Hi there.
All right. So talk about one of your services for a second, and let's see how we can tie that in with something like this.
Executive coaching.
All right. So Tom Smith is a writer at Entrepreneur, and he writes on all kinds of business things. So we put in a news alert for Tom Smith, executive coach. Now, there is no Tom Smith writing at Entrepreneur as far as I know. So nothing's going to come up. But when we put this in, if this hypothetical Tom Smith did exist, and he wrote an article about executive coaching, as he tends to write about business topics, then you would receive a news alert as soon as that came out. So let's say you're a reporter, and as soon as you write an article on a particular topic, you notice somebody sharing it and talking about how awesome that article is. What do you think is going to happen 2 or 3, 4 times of that happening when that person reaches out to Tom Smith?
Yeah, it's this is genius.
Thank you. So what you want to do is look at this from the perspective of, let's just go here. Let's go look up Entrepreneur for a second. Pretty sure. Wow, I actually spelled that correctly. How about that? All right, so let's see if we can find a writer. Let me see if we can find. Let's do this. All right. So, boom, boom, boom. All right. So who do we have here? Katie Belding. I bet if we throw Katie's name in here, so this is an example of one. Obviously, this one is past, but so right here, Katie Belding, executive coaching. So she's covered it. So when we throw these in here, we're immediately going to be notified when that writer has written a topic that covers your industry. Now you get 20 or so writers, which is not difficult to find. You could probably find 20 just on Entrepreneur alone. But you look at all the major publications plus some of the smaller trade pubs, you start putting these people's names in here, you could have a steady list of opportunities banging into your email inbox, probably on a weekly basis, if not daily, depending on your industry, right? Obviously, some industries are going to be more active. They're writing more frequently. There's more people. But regardless of what industry you're in, this is going to give you a huge opportunity. And this is both from the perspective of PR and exposure, but also from the perspective of SEO, because those links are going to have an impact on how your website ranks. Plus, they'll also, if it's a trustworthy, authoritative publication that gets traffic, then they'll also drive traffic when people see the links and potentially click on them. One other thing I want to touch on with the Google News Alerts is you can also use these to keep tabs on your competitors. So when a competitor gets featured in the media, you can also reach out to the people that featured them. And, you know, let's say they write a topic, David or Joe, you guys want to chime in with a topic that is relevant for you guys right now?
I would just say, drug testing in the COVID environment.
Right. It's a great example. Unfortunately, that's not going to work with the example I have in my head, though. Let's say, all right, so for those of you who don't know David, he has a company that does drug testing nationwide. So let's say some publication wrote an article about why we should, legalize recreational marijuana. He could then reach out to that same writer and pitch them an idea to write a counterpoint to that, right? So now we've got that article already exists. Now there's a counterpoint to it. If that writer writes that counterpoint, now that drives more value back to both of the articles, because there's some history going on there. And for the writer, I don't know how many of you guys write on a regular basis, but it's very difficult. Like, you have to come up with new ideas all the time. If you look at some of the more prolific writers, they're always looking for great ideas. So don't be afraid to pitch somebody an idea, because chances are they've got a deadline coming up that they have no idea what the hell they're going to write. So this is a great way to leverage that. Any questions on this part so far? All right. The next thing I want to talk about is your list. So we talked about tying your contact form into your list. And there's another aspect of this. I want to specify that we want to keep these, they're in the same list technically, but they're separate lists within that account, right? So the people who have contacted you on your contact form might be a different list depending on how you operate your business than the people who might go and provide their email address in order to get something of value. So who here wants to be an example? Drew, you wanna go with this one?
Sure.
All right. So Drew you're in the accounting field. Tell me a little bit more about what you do, Drew.
Right now, PPP loans.
Okay. All right. So there's a lot of misinformation about that right now, and there's a lot of information that people just don't have. So for the case of Drew, a great way to do something like this would be create it could be whatever. It could be a video. It could be a PDF. It could be some type of content that's basically protected in some way that it's not, you can't just go and straight download it. What they have to do is they have to sign up to get that piece of information. That's going to put them into your email list. The same way that we talked about the form on the contact page, we'd take the same approach here. So what we'd want to do in this case is we create a page where we're talking about whatever problem that thing solves. So Drew, would I be correct in saying if you screw up with how you handle the PPP, it could adversely affect you financially?
Correct.
Okay. So my understanding of it is that if you don't, like, for example, you're getting this to pay salaries, right? If you use it for something else, something, for yourself or some other non-payroll related expense, then that causes some kind of tax issue. Is that mostly accurate?
Mostly accurate.
Okay. So something along the lines of find out how to avoid 3 dangerous financial mistakes tied to the PPP loan, something like that. Like, that's not how I would word it, but that's the general direction of it. And then you can outline, a little bit of information about some of the mistakes without giving away the information. So, I think I kind of don't know enough about the mistakes to come up with that copy just off the top of my head. But if we were to, so we already talked about kind of the general direction of the headline, but then we can talk about, how some of these mistakes tend to be made, talk about how there's a lot of misinformation out there. We could talk about what the ramifications are, right? Like, as a business owner, I think we all know that, making a mistake from a tax perspective can be very expensive and very time consuming. So we start to tap into all of these aspects of it. And then from there, they have the opportunity to basically sign up, give you their email address and name. And then on the other side of that, they can either watch the video of you talking about this, or they can download the PDF, or whatever, whatever format makes sense. But basically what we're doing is you're taking you out of the equation. You're creating this page and this content one time, and then they get into your list. So we talked about Aweber, and I've just got one here. I've got a tab here of a new list that we created. If we create let's see, under messages and then campaigns, basically what this creates is a follow-up series. So you can set this up where I generally don't like any of the pre-built stuff, so we'll just call this test. So basically on subscribe, we can now send a message to them. In that message, we'll just do this for now. So now here in this message, so as soon as they sign up, they'll get this. Here's how to avoid blah, blah, blah. Within this, you can put your video, you can put your PDF for them to download, or you could just put them, whatever the information is, right here in the email. So basically what happens is they come to that page, they fill out the form, and then immediately they get this message. Now you could take this a step further. How many steps do you think you could break that down into, Drew? How many mistakes are there, or how many potential pitfalls?
Well, the most important thing right now is they're changing it about every 3 days. So
Awesome. Gotta love
Yeah.
the government.
mhm.
Okay. So what I would
But
do
that
in a
could be-
case, what's
I was
that?
gonna say that could be one of the subject lines. Latest update or
Yes.
what have you.
Right. So the really cool thing about this is you create the content once. So in this case, we might break this up into a series of 3 or 5 or 12. It just depends on how comprehensive that information is. But we could break it up into multiple steps. So once they sign up, it sends out part of the information. And then over the series of, the next 3 days, 5 days, 12 days, whatever it is, they're now getting a message every day. Each of those messages is a contact point. You're now building brand awareness. You're building trust. Each time you're sharing useful information that they can use, and it's not any extra work on your part. You set it up once, and then once they sign up, it automatically goes. And now, in addition to this series that we've got here, they're on your list in general. So if you have some other thing, so let's say they've updated PPP for the 937,000th time. You can send out an email that's separate from this series and say, hey, here's a quick update. Here's something important that you guys need to know about. Or you could send out something unrelated to that, right? They're already on your list. You could tell them about, I know we've got a lot of people here in the Tampa area. There's several local funds that are available. St. Pete has them. Tampa has them. I think Pasco County's got one. Those are all the kind of information that you could send out. And you've already got the people on your list. So, hey, here's a quick update. Tampa just released this fund, blah, blah, blah. So now you're building more brand awareness. And all of this is automated. So once it's in place, you don't have to do anything else. Any questions? All right. I think we've covered it all. If nobody has any questions, I guess we'll wrap it up for today then. Is there anything anyone wants to ask or add or talk about before we wrap up?
Yeah, Jeremy,
Yes.
the email follow-up sequence,
Yes.
I've heard lots of different variations, but some people say, oh, just 2 or 3 emails, sometimes 5 to 7. I know that depends a little bit on the product or the download or whatever it is that they received, but do you have a
Right.
rule of thumb for that?
I mean, I would say generally a minimum of 3 is a good starting point. You're going to want to test it though. So everybody has these ideas of what should work, but the reality is what works perfectly for me might work terribly for you and vice versa. So it's important to test things out. Even when things are going really well, don't be afraid to test out other things. If you're sending out an obnoxious number, like let's say, because I've got some people that they've got series where I've signed up for things and I've got emails in that series for like a month straight every single day. And I think that's probably overkill. I think at some point we start to tune out, and that point where we tune out is going to vary by audience. It's going to vary by the importance of the problem that we're solving. It's going to vary by, the value that we're conveying, right? Like if we could have the best product in the world or the best service in the world, but if we can't convey that value, how many emails we send isn't going to matter. So the message really is more important than the number, but ultimately it's all going to come down to experimenting. 3 is a good starting point. I think, once you go beyond, I probably wouldn't feel comfortable going beyond, 14 messages. That's basically 2 weeks there. But I think probably the number that makes sense is somewhere in the middle of those for most businesses. Another factor to look at on that, by the way, is the buying cycle, right? So for some of us, we've got something where we get on the phone or somebody fills out a contact form and they make a decision that day. In other cases, it might be 6 or 12 months. It just depends on what our buying cycle is for our particular product or services. Does that answer your question?
It does, thanks. And I just switched over to Aweber.
Okay.
And one of the things I'm playing with is, as you mentioned, the tags.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to make sure that when people have moved from, say, a prospect, a campaign sequence, and they've purchased something, or maybe they've signed up for a webinar or something, I don't want the same series of emails continuing to go to them all the time.
Right. So where are they purchasing? Are they purchasing like on the phone with you, or are they purchasing through an e-commerce system?
Usually on the phone.
Okay. So the bad news is that's probably going to have to be a manual process then, where you just go in and you manually apply the tags or remove the tags as is applicable. If you can find a way to allow them to make that purchase online, and that's fairly simple. Let me ask you this, if you don't mind sharing, what kind of price point are the typical sales for this?
Well, yeah, the one-on-one stuff, the high-end packages are expensive, but right now I'm doing groups and I'm doing more corporate training. I've had to pivot like the rest of us during COVID-19 and do different kinds of coaching programs to just help people. So yeah, for sure, some of the lower ticket stuff I could do that way.
Yeah. And for the higher ticket stuff, are you processing that by credit card, or is that like an ACH thing, or?
Yeah, see, because of where I'm located, I don't have the same access to all the e-transfers and all that kind of stuff that you guys have in the US.
You're in TNC, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a little bit more cumbersome to process payments for me, but
okay. So what is it that you're using for it then? Is it just credit cards?
Yeah.
Okay. So
or for the high, like anything over sort of $2,000 or $3,000, it's cheaper to direct wire transfer.
Okay. So for the lower end stuff, what you can do is is your website on WordPress?
Yes.
Okay. So WooCommerce is a great platform for e-commerce. And if you integrate that with Aweber, and it will integrate with literally anything, HubSpot, Infusionsoft, ActiveCampaign, you name it. But you can actually tie that all together to where when somebody purchases a product, you can then have it add and remove tags based on whatever criteria you want. So I've got it set up to where, like, let's say somebody comes in and they click on a link to schedule with us, that then removes one tag and adds a different tag. You can do the same thing in WooCommerce, where if they buy a product, then it will remove we'll say the prospect tag and add the customer tag. And that's fairly simple to set up. And if it's not something that's your background, it's not something you want to try and do yourself, we can get together later and I can talk with you about that. And, if you want to maybe have us do it, we can do that, or I can point you in the right direction, either way.
Yeah, or even just, as you're saying, in a remarketing campaign. So like if somebody has shown up to one of your webinars, they technically might be in a different email sequence than people who didn't. So how do you make sure that you're not, or once somebody has shown up for, registered for a webinar,
Mhm.
you
Stop
don't want
showing them the ad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I see a lot of people. It happens to me all the time. Like I'll buy a product on Amazon. Like I've gone through the checkout process. I've bought it, but then now it's chasing me around for the next 7 days. There's some tweaks that you can make within the ad campaigns to take people out of that system, so to speak. Um, there's a lot of variables in exactly how that gets executed. So I can't give a clear answer on that, but the short answer is it can be done.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Anybody else have any questions?
So do you use any specific tools when your leads come in to go out? You mentioned earlier, you know, connect with them on LinkedIn, Facebook, all the different spaces so that your content shows up. Is there any real strategy or tool you use for that, or just spreadsheet it?
So to connect with them, you mean like once a lead comes in, then connect with them on social?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like you saw in the landing page after the contact form, it's encouraging them to connect with me there. But generally, if I get a lead, the first thing I'm going to do is copy that name and then drop it into LinkedIn and go connect with them over there. As far as all the other stuff, like I'm not going to connect with them on Facebook right out of the gate. Generally, like I connect with business people on Facebook, but I'm a lot more selective in that because, as you know, I'm quite vocal in a lot of things on Facebook. As far as all the other platforms, you know, YouTube and stuff like that, I just encourage them to go there. There's no way to really connect with them through that. But for the most part, just I focus on LinkedIn because that's going to be, you know, the people who are active on LinkedIn are going to see my content there. And, you know, I tend to throw a lot looser type of content on Facebook. But that's just pretty much a manual process. I've tried to look into ways to automate that. And unfortunately, nothing reliable exists yet. And the reality is, I think I don't want to automatically connect with somebody until I get a chance to really see them and see, like, you know, are they even really active there? Or are they doing things or whatever? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and a segue into another question
Yes.
about LinkedIn specifically. I've had some people in our business talk about how LinkedIn is turning into the new Facebook. And, you know, as far as just the type of content, and so is the content you're putting in LinkedIn as visible as, let's say, in a business environment where we're posting things that, you know, out of 1,000 followers, you might see a handful of people that it was exposed to.
Right.
How do you increase that traffic in LinkedIn specifically?
So that's a matter of consistently getting out there, creating great content and engaging, right? So where a lot of people go wrong is they'll go and post something, and that's, you know, that's the extent of it. They'll post something and then maybe a week later they might post something, or a month later or whatever. The key is to post useful content on a regular basis. And we have to go further beyond just, hey, let me come up here and drop a link to this article. We need to actually write stuff. So for those of you who follow me on LinkedIn, you've seen what I'm talking about. You know, you share useful information that's going to be useful to somebody, whether they end up buying from you or not. And what that does is, first of all, it demonstrates your expertise. If you can articulate something that is useful to someone that they can then implement in their business and improve things in some way, then that's demonstrating that you probably have the capability to solve a particular problem they have. The other side of it is it also works with the algorithm in LinkedIn to get your content shown to more people. And where we are right now in LinkedIn is about where we were in 2008 or so with Facebook, where you had just massive organic reach. Those of you who've been marketing for some time, you might remember having a Facebook page where you would post something. We're not talking about the profile. We're talking about whether it's a public figure page or a page for your business, but you would post something and damn near all of your fans would see it. And a lot of them would engage with it. And then we saw that slowly get whittled down as Facebook started pushing more on the ads side. Now I think organic reach on Facebook for pages is somewhere in the single digit range in terms of percentages. For a well-performing page, you might see 1, maybe 2% reach if you're lucky, from a purely organic perspective. But LinkedIn doesn't have that problem yet. Now, I don't think it's always going to be that way. I think that as a lot more people start to migrate back over there and start to use it, it's going to change, because for the longest time, LinkedIn has been, for most people, just a place where you go and you dump your resume and that's it. You go and you update it when you have to change jobs. But what it's becoming is it's becoming more of a social network. There's a lot more engagement, a lot more activity over there. I do want to touch on a really important topic though, because I know we've been talking about various things we can do to automate things. For the love of God, do not automate messages on LinkedIn. All that's going to do is destroy your reputation. If any of you guys spend any time there, you've probably seen these where you get message after message after message, and it looks like this person is a crazy person because they're having a one-sided conversation. Like, I've got messages where a guy would come in and send me some bullshit message, and then I don't reply, but the next day I get a message saying, "Oh, really? That's really exciting. You must have worked really hard on that, blah, 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 blah." So there's some things that we can automate and there's some things that we shouldn't automate. So does that answer your question, David?
Sure does. Thanks.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else have a question? All right. All right. So if we have no other questions, then I'll go ahead and wrap this up and let you guys get back to your evening. And thank everyone for joining us up here today. If you guys have any questions afterwards, feel free to shoot me an email or, connect with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever. You all know how to get a hold of me. We're connected with a lot of you guys on social media anyway. So thanks for joining us today, and everybody have an awesome night.